what you expect is what you get. You're never going to do better than what you set out to do for yourself. So I set my graph to try to continue to improve physically, mentally, to learn new things, try new things, and try to continue to graph upwards as long as possible, with the idea that that's the best way for longevity.
That was Eric Jackson. Eric is a 4-time world champion and an Olympian who has dominated the whitewater kayaking scene for the past 3 decades. He spent 26 years on the U.S. Kayak Team between 1989 and 2015, competing and winning on an international level well into his 40s. In 2017, he again made the U.S. team, and most recently, at the age of 57, he made the team. That was in 2021. At the age of 2, Eric contracted scarlet fever, which caused him to completely lose hearing in both ears. He still lives with hearing loss and relies on hearing aids and lip reading as tools to help him communicate. This has been quite the challenge since the advent of COVID. Eric has never let hearing loss stop him from enjoying life and pursuing his ambitions. Today, he spends his free time helping others achieve their goals. This includes coaching the winners of almost every gold medal winner in freestyle kayaking over the last 15 years, including 2 of his 3 children. Let's learn about this Olympian who embodies what it means to redefine ageism and who is intent on changing the paradigm on aging in America.
I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, and we elected to launch this podcast because we know older adults have such inspiring stories and wisdom worth sharing. We have now all learned that social connections are critical to our well-being. This podcast is made possible by 50 Forward, the leading resource for adults 50 plus in Middle Tennessee who seek to live longer, more fulfilling lives.
You're listening to Squeeze the Day, where we talk to extraordinary people over the age of 50 who are living their best life now. Their stories of a well-lived life are both inspiring and encouraging to all of us as we seek to navigate a meaningful and purpose-driven second chapter in our life. Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. I'm Susan Sizemore, Communications Director for 50 Forward, so let's get started. Welcome, Eric. We always like to learn a bit about our guests' roots. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from Rock Island, Tennessee right now. I call that my home, but I was born in Ohio. My dad said we come from a hillbilly heritage. So,
how did you become so interested in outdoor sports?
Well, anybody who spends time in the outdoors ultimately gets hooked on outdoors. That's the way I think it is. But my dad was in the military, he was a special forces and loved camping and being outside. He took me backpacking and camping at a really young age. And then ultimately what really hooked me was my first overnight whitewater canoe trip at age 6, where we ran Pine Creek of Pennsylvania and camped out, caught fish, ran whitewater. I was hooked ever since.
That was in a canoe, I assume, at the age of 6 and not in a kayak.
That was in a canoe. However, the people that were on the canoe trip with us was my dad was an engineer at Piper Aircraft making airplanes, and most of the test pilots were there. And one of the test pilots, Wilford Kling, had a homemade kayak that he made, and I managed to talk him out of it and let me paddle it for quite a bit of time, and I never wanted to get back in the canoe. So I got to spend quite a bit of time in that canoe at age 6. So yeah, at 6, I finally got hooked on kayaking.
So you're now famous for a number of reasons because of your kayaking. When did you decide you were going to make that your sport of choice?
In 72, at age of 8, I watched Mark Spitz win 7 gold medals in the Munich Olympics for swimming. And I decided I wanted to go to the Olympics and I wanted to do that. So I became a swimmer, and I was a swimmer throughout, but I was also whitewater kayaking. I got as far as like a national champion and a New England champion for butterfly for swimming. But the kayaking really, really was something that it was more fun than swimming. Like swimming, you're head down and you just like follow the black line till you get to a T, and then you turn around and go the other way. And you just do it over and over and over and over and over again. Where kayaking, you're out in this beautiful, like, liquid conveyor belt in the valley, seeing all these cool places. When I realized that there was a U.S. team for whitewater kayaking, which was in, I think, 1982 or 83, when I realized that existed, I immediately changed my emphasis from becoming an Olympic swimmer to an Olympic kayaker.
That is really amazing. And really knowing your background in swimming and the Mark Spitz influence, let's talk a little bit about being an athlete over the age of 50 and kind of why you think it's so important to continue to strive for new heights and health benefits as you age.
That's a good question. So I intend to live to at least 100, 120 was just the random number that I picked. And then my son-in-law told me about a 132-year-old, and I'm like, what? 132? I didn't know you could do that. Like, I have to change my goals. And if you follow somebody's health, when you watch older people, when they get to the point, between the 50 and forward, you can take a piece of graph paper and you can pretty much extrapolate the graph to the day they're going to die, likely. That's the way I look at it. And as an individual, I don't want to be operating like I want to be physically fit, mentally fit, and be able to do the things I want to do way later in life. If I'm going to live to 120, well, at age 100, last 20 years, I don't want to be a vegetable that can't walk around the house, right? I'm going to be a 100-year-old that's banging out my 100 push-ups and doing, I need to be running around and healthy. Otherwise, how am I going to live another 20 years, right? So it occurred to me when I started looking at people that live to an older age, if you just look at best practices and what works and what doesn't, what you expect is what you get. It doesn't mean things can't happen. You can get cancer, there's illnesses can happen, you can have accidents, there's things that can hurt you physically and mentally, but you're never going to do better than what you set out to do for yourself. So I set my graph to try to continue to improve physically, mentally, to learn new things, try new things, to do things physically that I wasn't able to do last year, and try to continue to graph upwards as long as possible, with the idea that that's the best way for longevity. So anyway, that's just how I approach it. I'm my own little guinea pig. But if you look around and you really watch where people go later in life, 90% of where they go is where they kind of, you hear them say, yeah, I just don't recover like I used to, or I can't do that like I used to. Like, oh, I'm so sore and tired and whatever. And it's like, no, you know what? You used to exercise. You don't exercise anymore. Now you exercise and you're sore. That's because you haven't been exercising. You exercise every day. It's use it or lose it.
Are there people right now that you see who are older than you are, who you emulate or who you kind of follow in their footsteps?
I have seen many. There's the guy, I don't remember his name, that he could do, handstand push-ups. He was a gymnast, in his 80s and whatever, and he was like super physically fit. It's more along those lines, where just seeing the anomalies and what they did, and the difference isn't that they are so special, that there's something in their DNA or physical about them. It's simply that they put in the effort. They didn't allow themselves, like aging gracefully. It's like, that's the last thing I'm going to do. Like, there's no way in hell I'm going to gracefully age. I'm going to continue to stay young as gracefully as I can. And whatever age I end up, that's fine. But I just think it's energy in equals energy out. That's all. So you get what you expect.
Put forth the effort and you get the results. Let's talk a little bit about mental acuity, because you are full of energy and you're super sharp. Do you do certain things that really, you would say, kind of stimulate your brain as well as an athlete?
I don't even remember where it came from, but there's a quote. I think it might have been Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Winning tapes that my dad gave me at age 18, so they're really old. I don't know if Dennis Waitley's still alive or not, but he has a program called Psychology of Winning. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from. And one of the lines in there is, do you have just enough energy to get through the day? Isn't it amazing how you just get through the day and then you just like crash and you're tired? You ever wonder why? It's like the amount of energy you have is how much energy you expect to have. It's like other examples are My family always gets the flu in July, as if the little flu bugs are waiting outside your window in July for their annual July welcome. Well, the reality is, if you feel like you're tired and you want to be tired, or I just want to have enough energy to get through 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, I'm just going to crash. Well, you're going to crash at 5. So how much energy do you need? It really just depends. Are you setting goals? What's your personal goal? Is there something you really want to do that you haven't done yet? Set that goal. That if that goal is something you're excited about, you'll create the energy to get there and do it. And it's not automatic and instant in all cases, because if you haven't burnt that much energy in a day, it might take a little practice to get back up to that energy level. But it's there. If it was there before, it's there now. So number one, have a goal that you're excited about. You have to, what is it you haven't accomplished you want to accomplish? If your goal in life is to retire and sit back and do nothing, well, then you're going to crash and burn. The average retiree in Florida lives 7 years before they die. They retire, go to Florida. Average lifespan is 7 years. You should not be looking forward to retiring and then just doing nothing, because that's not a very long period to enjoy it, right? So it doesn't mean you can't retire from your work, but you really need to replace whatever your work goal that you had with something else that's important that you want to accomplish.
Really interesting perspective. And we see that all the time, that people need to stay engaged, relevant, have a sense of purpose, or the health issues tend to surface. And for whatever reason that is, I think you really bring up some really good, important things, I think, for people to think about. Let's talk a little bit about being a world kayak champion. So you're a 4-time world kayak champion and Olympian. Curious how you use your skills today to help others, especially to break down the stereotypes of aging.
Well, I guess I won my first world championships in 93, so I was 29 years old. I was in the Olympics in 92 at 28, and that's relatively old. When I was growing up, men peaked at age 28, and I've proved that is so BS. That's so wrong. And again, that goes back to people peak when they slow down and stop pushing themselves forward. My next world championships was in 2001. So I was 36, and I was the oldest one at the time. And then my next world championships, 41 years old. And that was kind of a big one, because, oh, wow, he's 40. These 19, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are competing against a 40-year-old. And I remember in the 92 Olympics, before the 92 Olympics, this guy, Tom, was training to try to make the Olympic team in 92. And he was exactly 40 years old. And at the time, we're just thinking, man, he is so old. I can't believe this old guy is trying to make the Olympic team, right? And it turned out that it certainly was nothing to do with his age. He wasn't skilled enough at the time to make it. But when I was 41 years old or 43 years old, you couldn't beat me in a kayak pretty much. I don't care what age, you were at a disadvantage because I've had more experience, more skill, and more strength. Now I'm 57 years old. And the reality is I don't train as hard as I used to. That's all I wanted to do is train for kayaking. I have new goals. I have business goals and fishing goals. I have a new fishing career. There's other things I'm pursuing. So my whitewater kayaking skills aren't as high as they used to be. But with certainly trying to lead by example, my team that I put together of top paddlers that I coach, they all know that if they're having fun, their age is not going to have anything to do with it. It's just participating, training, trying to have the best equipment and the best coaching and do the best you can.
I love the fact that you talked a little bit about not only your age, but the fact that you're kind of moving yourself into a new career, a new phase of life, and then you're still coaching and mentoring some younger kayakers. And I want to ask you two things. What are the toughest things about kayaking in and out of competition? And also, how do you relate those experiences not only to the people that you coach, but to your sons who you coach?
The best way I describe being a competitive kayaker to those that I coach and those that whether it be my family, my daughter's a 2-time world champion. My son is destroying the competition. He's the best in the world right now.
My apologies to your daughter. I did not know that. So let's just throw that right in there and I will interrupt you. But I certainly don't want to overlook a female kayaker.
Yeah, let's not overlook my daughter, Emily. She's had undefeated season. She's like an amazing athlete. She's 32 with 2 kids, and she won the national championships 8 months pregnant, like 8 years ago. She's pretty,
wow,
very impressive individual. Anyway, when I'm coaching, and I've coached most of the world champions over the last 20 years, and most of them are in the Jackson families, and between my son, myself, my son-in-law, my daughter. But the primary coaching, it's about showing off how much fun you've been having, how much you've been playing on the water. So you don't do kayaking just because your guidance counselor said this is a good way to make money, right? You become a professional kayaker, or if you want to like dedicate your life to being a kayaker, it's because you really enjoy the paddling, and you try to find out a way to make money doing it so that you don't have to get a real job. And that's exactly what I did. But the way I like to describe performing well is when you go to competitions to show off how hard you've been playing, essentially. Those that win competitions have been spent many hours on the water playing really hard, more than their competitors, and more focused playing. And that's really what it comes down to, is you're playing with a purpose. So when you're playing on the water, you're trying to learn new things. You're trying to do things that nobody else has ever done before. You're trying to break new ground, whether it's bigger, better, harder, faster, or whatever. You're new places, you're traveling. It's really what I consider the ultimate lifestyle. It's where you're spending the winters in the southern hemisphere in Africa, New Zealand, Australia, South America, Central America, to get away from the cold, traveling, but you're looking for very specific places, and they're not tourist places, and they're in the middle of nowhere, so you're assimilating into the culture. And that is what the sport of kayaking for me has been. And the toughest part is breaking out of the norms. There is, if you go to school, you go to Harvard, and you ask them, like, I want to be a professional kayaker, they aren't going to give you any advice that has any value. And neither is your high school guidance counselor, neither is your family members. They're all going to be like, how much money can you make kayaking? Like, that sounds like, you're going to be a kayak bum? Like, yeah, I guess so. Nobody ever suggests that you do it. So the toughest thing is to not listen to the advice of all the people that truly care about you, because the people that truly care about you are going to go with best practices. This is what we know works. 1 million people have done this, and it works. What you're about to do, it doesn't have any real track record. I can't, in good faith, as your parent or your child or your sister or brother, recommend you do this, because I don't know anybody that's ever pulled it off. So why don't you just get a real job like most people and then kayak when you have time off?
Really interesting perspectives. And I feel like, it's rare that people would sit down and talk to somebody who's had this kind of an athletic career, life, the passion for the sport, and then also thinking about even having to follow the rivers, if that's what you call them, across the globe to find the right competitive places to train. Now, before I forget, let's just talk a little bit about where you live, because the Olympics were held not too far from where you are, and were you in that competition?
I live in Middle Tennessee, which is Nashville technically is part of Middle Tennessee, but I live on a geographical thing called the Cumberland Plateau. So there's this in Tennessee, you got East Tennessee, which is the Smokies, and then you come out of the Smokies, you come into the Cumberland Plateau, and then you go into the Great Basin once you get to Nashville, and it's basically flatlands all the way to the Rockies, right? Until you get to the high plains. So that's called the Great Basin. We're on the Cumberland Plateau, which goes from Alabama all the way to Virginia. This Cumberland Plateau is a large, elevated, 1,500 vertical feet of gradient surface that the rains fall on. And when the rivers come off of the Cumberland Plateau, they make just amazing whitewater rivers. I live on the best one, the Caney Fork River, which is where Rock Island, Tennessee is. And it's the best for what I do. What makes it the best, like right now, the river's running at 11,000 cubic feet per second, which is about as much water as flows in all of England, the whole country of England, and just is flowing here right now. So it's a high volume river. It's got freestyle kayaking. It has waterfalls. It has class 5 whitewater. From my house, where I'm sitting in my office right now, and by the way, my hair was still wet from paddling. I just got off the water.
Wow.
I was just surfing Brave Wave, which is a wave that I named back in 1999. I can get up from this chair, grab my kayak, and be to the put-in of this world-class whitewater in less than 3 minutes. So it's 1.2 miles that way. Now I can actually walk down the hill and put in to run the waterfalls. So it's just amazing center. Now there's all kinds of epic whitewater like to run, like remote runs, like 10-mile, 12-mile runs. Some of the biggest waterfalls in the world you can find within an hour of here. Some of them are within 15 minutes. It's just an epic place. So for me, what extended my career, I started a kayak company called Jackson Kayak. I have a new company called Apex Watercraft now, but when I started Jackson Kayak, I was 40 years old exactly, and I was like, every kayak owner that I knew, kayak company owner I knew, stopped kayaking because now they're a business person. You run this business. You don't have time. They'd always say, like, I own a kayak company. How am I supposed to have time to go kayaking? And I was never going to start a kayak company for that reason. And my wife, Christine, said, you mean to tell me you can't come up with a way that you can kayak more than you are now and own your own company? So she challenged me that way. And of course, she knows how to get me to do things. Is tell me I can't do something and then watch me do it anyway. So I was like, okay. So by starting it here at Rock Island, I could do 2 workouts a day. I could literally get up from my office, my home office, which is where I'm at now, go down, paddle for an hour and a half, like train, come back, and be done paddling before 8 a.m., go again after work and be done, and do 2 workouts a day. So I won 2 world championships after I started the business, and all of it was from training right here at Rock Island. Now, like you said, the Olympics was held in East Tennessee on the Ocoee River, 96. I was in the first alternate for that team. I didn't make that team. It was a mental trauma for me because I thought I was going to make the team and win the Olympics. But the Olympics before that in Barcelona in 92, I did make that team, and I was the top American in that event. I got 13th place, but the Ocoee River is a very popular rafting river. But you know what the new number 1 rafted river in the world is? The Pigeon River in East Tennessee. It's the number 1 rafted river. Pigeon River, Tennessee. So Tennessee's had 2 number 1 rivers in the world. The Ocoee was number 1 for a while. The American in California was number 1 for a while. The Arkansas in Colorado was number 1 for a while. All the American rivers are number 1 just because of our population base, I guess.
Does the Pigeon River have many rapids?
It does. They're not really big rapids. They're good class 2, 3 plus, as you would call them. But it's within 15, 20 minutes from Gatlinburg. So they have the traffic. It's also the Smoky Mountain National Forest is the number 1 national park in the U.S., and it has double the visitors of number 2.
Fascinating information, things that I didn't know, and it's not that I haven't really cared about them, but I think that it's really, you're a wealth of info. Let's talk a little bit about hearing loss, because I know that you lost your hearing at a young age, and, I know that has to have impacted your life.
Yeah, I had scarlet fever as a kid, and I was totally deaf for some period, like about a month, and the hearing kind of came back to a level that, I don't know, I guess the best way to describe it, I have about 70% hearing loss in both ears. I didn't have hearing aids at a young age. We grew up without a lot of money, and my parents didn't have enough money to buy me hearing aids. I remember my mom crying in the doctor's office because, she couldn't afford them or whatever. And what are your alternatives? Well, we just pushed my desk front and center in front of the teacher. But communication for me is definitely, like, if you meet me when I'm not wearing my hearing aids, you would know right away that I don't hear very well, or you would think I don't care. If I'm one-on-one, like, I learn to communicate. Looking at other people, especially people that lose their hearing later in age, it's a real problem because they, as a kid, didn't learn it. They didn't live with it their whole lives. So what happens is they suddenly realize they become uncomfortable in conversation because they're missing things. And then people kind of make fun of them a little bit or harass them because, you can't hear or listen or whatever. And then they just tune out and then stop communicating. It's easier just to go watch TV or go do something else, and they jump out of the conversation. And that's what I'm seeing with older people that lose hearing. And it's a real sad thing to watch because it's easier to not engage with people that they really care about than it is to fix the problem. I was really lucky to, my grandmother gave me hearing aids in college. She bought me my first hearing aids, and they were the worst things ever. They were analog. They were so noisy. Anyway, I couldn't get myself to wear them. I preferred not to wear them. And I went through a whole series of hearing aids. And to be honest with you, I chose not to have hearing aids over hearing aids until very recently. To put it in perspective, the hearing aids I'm wearing now are the first time in my entire life, and they're a year old, and it's like the latest technology, where I fall asleep and forget I have my hearing aids on.
Wow. So
hearing aids have a bad rap because they really weren't very good for a long time. I'd say as of 2020, 2021, for the first time in history, the technology of hearing aids are at a level that it's almost like you just have good hearing again. But better yet, here's what's really cool. My hearing aids are connected to my phone. When I do a call, I hear in both ears. I can block out the outside sound, or I can hear the outside sound. I can listen to music and hear what's going on around me, or block it out. It's night and day. I was bragging on my last hearing aids 2 years ago because they were so much better than the ones before. But now I'm finally at a place where, for the first time, I don't take them out in the first possible moment. I just literally go to bed, lay down, and be like, my hearing aids. When you do that, that means you forget you have them in. So don't let somebody talk you out of checking them out, because it's like night and day.
You have said so many important things in this last little conversation about hearing, and the empathy you have for people who are hearing impaired or who have had a loss of hearing, as well as the scenarios you've explained. I bet every one of us can think about a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, a friend, where that's exactly the case. And I also love the fact that you talk about how sometimes it's easier for people to isolate and pull themselves out of a circumstance rather than admit that that's what they're dealing with.
Somebody who loses hearing over time, they're not equipped. They haven't learned to read lip. They're not quick at adjusting to where people are. They're more at risk of being isolated. In fact, I read a study where Alzheimer's and other mental issues are way more prominent when somebody loses their hearing. It's just because they're suddenly one of their senses is gone. Something they've relied on their whole life isn't there. And worse is the way they interact with people. They can't even do it. Your whole life, you just hear somebody say something, you respond. All of a sudden, you don't hear them. They're frustrated. They're not coaching you and helping you because they don't have enough experience to know what to do. So you're just out of the loop, and you just feel like, life is crashing in on you. You don't know what to do, whatever. Hearing aids fix that. I have the new Resound Ones is the exact hearing aids that I'm using. It's the only one that has a microphone in the ear here, besides the outside. There's a reason your ears are shaped like this. I don't know if you knew this. This shape is to funnel the sound into your ear. It does two things. It tells you distance of the sound is from you and direction. If you cut your ear off, you don't know where the sound is coming from or the distance. The ear, it's called the pinna effect. Your ear focuses the sound in a way when you hear something, you know the distance away and where it came from. If you wear normal, not these, but normal hearing aids that only has the microphones on these things, you don't know when somebody says something, you don't know where it came from, and you don't know the distance. By having the microphone in the inside, it's using the ear, the pinna effect. So it's just another example why technology is so important, right?
Let's talk a tiny bit about the advent of COVID and hearing loss because of masks and all the situations that have made it extremely difficult, certainly, to read lips.
Yeah, the lip reading is something I'm very proud of and very skilled at. And the mask, if I go to the airport and the person behind the desk is saying, they'll say, can I have the passport or whatever. There's no lip reading. It's a real problem. So at that stage, if I don't have my hearing aids on, there's no communication. There's just, let's see, I'm checking in. They need a passport. They need my ticket. And I just go through the motions, and there's no communication. I cannot hear most people in that situation. I'm not the only one experiencing that, obviously, and it's a real problem. The good news is most people have had enough experience with COVID now that they have empathy towards it. They realize that they have to speak up for you to hear. And if other people don't do it, they're not going to be able to hear also. They've been in the same situation. So there's very few people today that haven't been in that situation. So it's a lot easier to get people to, accommodate, speak up, can you write it down? Anything like that can help.
We have a closing question that we ask. Is there one piece of advice in general that an older adult or a parent might have given you that you think just rings true every day?
I do, and it's one we already talked about, unfortunately. But yeah, I guess it's probably the one from my dad, which is you should always take 100% responsibility for every relationship you're in. And what that means is that whatever's going on in the relationship, it's nobody else's fault or benefit other than you. If there's a challenge in the relationship, it's your job to fix it 100%. You're not waiting for somebody else to get on their horse and do something. You're taking action and responsibility. And by doing that, you're lowering the barrier for the other person, making it easier for them to accommodate. The relationship is going to make progress a lot quicker. They're not going to be holding back. That's by far the best piece that I got. I've got a lot of other ones, but that's one that works, especially as people are getting older and relationships become really important with kids and grandkids, everything else.
So, Eric, what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
I just look at what is it that I want to do? What do I want to accomplish today? What's the most important thing to me today? And it's not necessarily a to-do list, but more like on a big scale, like what is it I'm really hungry and want to achieve? That gets my blood flowing, my adrenaline going, gets me excited, gets me up early in the morning, and then from there, everything else falls in place.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us today. What an amazing life of leadership we're witnessing from interviews and stories just like yours. Now we challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day.